Nigeria President Bola Ahmed Tinubu says over 8,000 criminals, including kidnappers, bandits, Boko Haram terrorists and armed robbers have been killed since he took over office in 2023, adding that 10,000 persons, mostly women and children, were rescued from kidnappers, emphasizing that Nigeria is now more secure than it was when he was sworn in as the president of the West Africa country. This, he stated after the president of the Catholic Bishops' Conference of Nigeria, CBCN, Archbishop Lucius Iwejuru Ugorji, stated that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu economic policies are pushing millions of Nigerians into poverty. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu made the response to the observations made by the CBCN president on Sunday in Abuja during the opening session of the first plenary meeting of the 2025 Catholic Bishops' Conference, held at the Catholic Secretariat of Nigeria, CSN. According to Archbishop Ugorji, the economic reforms introduced by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's administration has triggered skyrocketing inflation and pushed millions of Nigerians into poverty. While speaking at the event themed, Jubilee of Hope, a light for a better Nigeria, he said Nigerians have continued to endure increasing hardship on account of the harsh socio-economic situation, including high cost of petroleum products, transportation and essential goods. While the economic reforms introduced by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's administration aims at stabilizing the economy on the long term, they have significantly triggered skyrocketing inflation, drastically reduced the purchasing power of Nigerians, and plunged millions into poverty. The World Bank projects that 129 million Nigerians now live below the poverty line. The 2024 Global Report on Food Crisis lists Nigeria as the second globally in terms of acute food insecurity, with 24 million people categorized as food insecure. According to data drawn from the National Bureau of Statistics, food inflation hit 39.84% in December 2024. It is reported that Nigerians now spend about 65% of their income on food alone. Thus healthcare and other basic necessities are sacrificed, Ugorji said. He noted that government's efforts to alleviate the sufferings of the citizenry through the distribution of palliatives, duty waivers on imported food items, and other measures have remained the tip of the iceberg. He said while Nigerians continued to suffer and die, the resultant daily stress is having heavy tolls on the mental health of many parents as they overstretch themselves to make ends meet. Bayo Onanuga, in a press release on Monday, stated that the Catholic Bishops' Conference, at its first plenary meeting of 2025 in Abuja at the weekend, gave an alarming prognosis of the state of the economy and the polity that sounded more like snippets from an outdated book. In his opening address, CBCN President Archbishop Lucius Iwejuru listed youth unemployment, insecurity, poverty, corruption, and electoral fraud as some of the ills plaguing the country. He demanded quick action from leaders nationwide to stop the country from drifting. President Bola Tinubu deeply appreciates the constant interventions of the Catholic bishops in matters of governance in our country. The Conference of Catholic Bishops' patriotic fervor and commitment to national unity, peace, and stability are unassailable and deeply valued and respected by the government. While some of the governance challenges in the areas highlighted by the bishops remain, it is important to state categorically that our country has made tremendous progress in all areas since President Tinubu assumed office about 22 months ago. In terms of insecurity, Nigeria is more secure today than it was in 2023, thanks to our military and other security agencies. And the strong leadership provided by President Tinubu as the commander-in-chief. In the last 2 years, over 8,000 criminals, bandits, armed robbers, Boko Haram terrorists, and kidnappers have been eliminated, and over 10,000 Nigerians, primarily women and children, have been rescued from their abductors. As a result of improved security in our communities, especially in the Northwest and the Northeast, farmers have returned to their farms, and our country has seen increased food production, which is currently driving down prices of essential commodities. Farmers in Kaduna, Kebbi and Jigawa are eloquent testimonies of the improved security ambience. Similarly, farmers growing cash crops in many parts of the country are experiencing a new life of boom and prosperity. On the economy, Tinubu's administration has stabilized the economy from the precarious situation it inherited on assumption of office. Our balance of trade has improved, foreign reserves are in a stronger position, inflation has moderated, our currency is gaining strength against convertible currencies, local refining capacity has tremendously increased on the back of Dangote Refinery and NNPCL refineries in Port Harcourt and Warri, going on stream. Realizing the importance of youth to national development and economic growth, President Tinubu's administration has designed programs that will catalyze youth employment, enhance their capability, and harness their ingenuity, creativity, and talents for better productivity. These programs, including 3MTT, NATEP, LEAP, IDICE, NIA, and the Nigerian Youth Investment Fund, were designed to create over 10 million new jobs for young people. More than ever, the country has increased revenue collection phenomenally and is mobilizing more local revenue to fund critical development priorities. Under President Tinubu, Nigeria spends more on economic and social infrastructure such as roads, power, healthcare, education, and security. The unprecedented 54.9 trillion Naira's 2025 budget is designed to revitalize the economy and set it on a new growth trajectory. Local and international institutions have continued to praise the Tinubu administration's implementation of necessary reforms. Last week, Chatham House, a United Kingdom international affairs policy think tank, praised President Tinubu's team's economic management. In an article, Chatham House said Nigeria's economy had been most competitive under President Tinubu in 25 years due to his reforms. While we agree that many Nigerians still face difficulties, we remain convinced that the government is making the right decisions to lead to a better and more prosperous country. President Tinubu and his team will continue to work very hard on behalf of our compatriots to deliver the promise of a greater and stronger Nigeria. The Tinubu administration is optimistic about the future and the ongoing positive changes, said Bayo Onanuga, special advisor to the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu on information and strategy on March 10, 2023.
Barely 3 months after Syria ended its more than a decade-long civil war, with the ousting of the then President Bashar al-Assad who fled into exile in Russia, another civil war broke out in the northwestern part of Syria on Thursday, which many observers, especially war monitors, described as the deadliest in recent history, with war monitors putting the human casualty figures at more than 1,000. But many local residents claim the numbers of human deaths recorded in the multiple clashes that continued till Sunday night may be more than 1,200, with Al Jazeera showing a video footage of one of the war monitors uprooting dead bodies from shallow graves. The TV station said to be among the 230 Syrian security operatives killed during the clashes, after deadly gunfiring ensued between armed group loyal to the ousted al-Assad and pro-interim government security operatives, which escalated to multiple attacks on civilians, and most of the civilians were killed in large numbers at their homes. The UK-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, SOHR, which monitors fighting in Syria, said about 745 civilians were killed in 30 massacres targeting Alawites on the west coast on Friday and Saturday, adding that the number of fighters killed in the past 4 days brings the total death toll to more than 1,000 people, which the Syrian Observatory Group said included about 125 fighters linked to the new Islamist-led government and 148 pro-Assad fighters. It was gathered that the violence erupted along the Mediterranean coast, a region predominantly inhabited by the Alawite minority, to which Assad belongs. Local observers said that the death toll is the highest since 2011, when Syria has been engulfed in civil war. Syria's interim president, Ahmad al-Shara, on Sunday called for national unity as international alarm grew over the violence. What is happening in the country are expected challenges. We must preserve national unity and civil peace in the country, Shara said at a mosque in Damascus he said he used to pray at 2 decades ago. We are capable of living together in this country, as much as we can, he added. The ongoing clashes are the worst outbreak of violence since Assad, a member of the minority Alawite sect, was toppled in December by Sunni Islamist militants who sought to reshape the country's political and sectarian order, according to CNN. Adding, Latakia and Tartus on the Mediterranean coast are areas where support among Syrian Alawites for Assad was strong. Alawites, some 10% of the population, were prominent in the Assad regime, and while many Alawites have surrendered their weapons since December, many others have not. The latest surge in violence highlights the challenges Syria's new regime faces in appeasing disenfranchised groups, especially those that remain heavily armed. Meanwhile, the United Nations Human Rights Chief, Volker Turk, in a statement on Sunday, published on the UN Human Rights website, said that the killing of civilians in coastal areas in northwest Syria must cease immediately. Following a series of coordinated attacks reportedly launched by elements of the former government and other local armed men, we are receiving extremely disturbing reports of entire families, including women, children and/or their combat fighters, being killed. There are reports of summary executions on a sectarian basis by unidentified perpetrators, by members of the caretaker authority's security forces, as well as by elements associated with the former government. The caretaker authority's announcements of their intention to respect the law must be followed by swift actions to protect Syrians, including by taking all necessary measures to prevent any violations and abuses and achieve accountability when these occur. There must be prompt, transparent and impartial investigations into all the killings and other violations, and those responsible must be held to account, in line with international law norms and standards. Groups terrorizing civilians must also be held accountable. These events, as well as the continuous spike in hate speech both online and offline, illustrate once again the urgent need for a comprehensive transitional justice process that is nationally owned, inclusive, and centered on truth, justice and accountability, the UN Human Rights Chief stated. The U.S. Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, in a statement also on Sunday said that the United States condemns the radical Islamist terrorists, including foreign jihadists, that murdered people in western Syria in recent days. The United States stands with Syria's religious and ethnic minorities, including its Christian, Druze, Alawite, and Kurdish communities, and offers its condolences to the victims and their families. Syria's interim authorities must hold the perpetrators of these massacres against Syria's minority communities accountable, said Marco Rubio. More than 25 persons have been reportedly killed during the week in Ukraine since President Vladimir Putin of Russia scaled up and doubled his offensive attacks on the neighboring European country, with President Donald Trump continuing during the week to block more U.S. military aid to the troubled country and making statements seemingly capable of demoralizing Ukrainian troops and probably inciting the entire Ukrainian citizens against their president, Volodymyr Zelensky, just as reports indicated that in the last 3 days, Russian troops have advanced, retook some territories in the Kursk region and are about encircling the thousands of Ukrainian troops who had last summer stormed and took over the Russian Kursk region by surprise in anticipation to use the conquered Russian Kursk region as leverage to be able to hold meaningful negotiations with Moscow in any peace talks. This, as unverified and unsubstantiated rumors have spread widely in the North America country, the U.S., that President Donald Trump was one of the U.S. businessmen contracted in 1987 as Russia's spy, with Alnur Mosayev, the former Kazakhstan National Security Committee, KNB head and former Kazakh intelligence chief who served in the 6th Directorate in Moscow of the KGB, a Russian language abbreviation for State Security Committee, which was the main internal security agency for the Soviet Union from 1954 until its breakup in 1991. Insisting that recruiting Western businessmen was a top priority for Soviet intelligence, and Donald Trump was allegedly recruited by his department as a spy against the United States with a nickname, Krasnov. According to reporters covering the war in Ukraine, the deadliest Russian strikes occurred late on Friday in the Donetsk region town of Dobropilya, with at least 11 people killed when 2 ballistic missiles hit 8 residential buildings and a shopping center, as confirmed by Ukrainian officials. Other attacks in the region killed 9 people and wounded 13 on Friday and Saturday, local officials added, according to BBC. In addition to halting military and intelligence help, President Donald Trump of the U.S. suspended Ukraine's access to some satellite imagery. Space technology company Maxar stated this on Friday. Reuters reported that Maxar, in a statement, said it has contracts with the U.S. government and dozens of allied and partner nations, and each customer makes their own decisions on how they use and share that data. The company said the contract in question is GEGD, the Global Enhanced GEOINT Delivery Program, a U.S. government program providing access to commercial satellite imagery collected by the United States. The U.S. government has decided to temporarily suspend Ukrainian accounts in GEGD, Matsa said, referring further questions to the U.S. National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, which confirmed the action. In accordance with the administration's directive on support to Ukraine, now has temporarily suspended access to the Global Enhanced GEOINT Delivery System, or GEGD, which is the primary portal for access to U.S. government-purchased commercial imagery, a spokesperson for the agency said. Matsa's action was first reported by the military news outlet Military. We take our contractual commitments very seriously, and there is no change to other Matsa customer programs, the company said in a statement. The former intelligence chief in the USSR, Alnor Mosayev, in a statement during the week, said in quote thus, in 1987, I worked in the 6th Department of the KGB of the USSR in Moscow. The most important area of work of the 6th Department was the acquisition of spies and sources of information from among businessmen of capitalist countries. It was in that year that our department recruited the 40-year-old businessman from the USA, Donald Trump, nicknamed Krasnov. Meanwhile, not less than 14 people have been killed after a Russian missile strike on Ukraine's eastern city of Dobropilya. U.S. President Donald Trump during the week warned of potential World War III if Ukraine conflict isn't resolved, threatens U.S. withdrawal if peace isn't achieved. Also, days after the U.S. suspended all military aid to Ukraine and halted intelligence sharing with Kyiv, President Trump said he is finding it more difficult to deal with Ukraine, and that it may be easier dealing with Russia on a final agreement to end the war. President Donald Trump said that he finds it easier to deal with Russia than with Ukraine in efforts to end the war, and that he trusts President Vladimir Putin. I'm finding it more difficult, frankly, to deal with Ukraine, and they don't have the cards, he said. Reuters reported that thousands of Ukrainian troops who stormed into Russia's Kursk region last summer in a shock incursion are nearly surrounded by Russian forces there, in a major blow to Kyiv, which hoped to use its presence there as leverage over Moscow in any peace talks. Ukraine's situation in Kursk has deteriorated sharply in the last 3 days, open source maps show, after Russian forces retook territory as part of a gathering counteroffensive that has nearly cut the Ukrainian force in two and separated the main group from its principal supply lines. The precarious situation for Ukraine comes after Washington suspended its intelligence sharing with Kyiv and raises the possibility that its forces may be forced into a politically awkward and psychologically difficult retreat back into Ukraine, or risk being captured or killed. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on Saturday issued a press statement and stated that, today, all day long, work continued in the city of Dobropilya, the Donetsk region, following a Russian strike. It was one of the most brutal attacks, a combined strike carefully planned to cause maximum damage. Missiles, along with Shad drones, targeted the central part of the city. 9 residential buildings, a shopping center, and stores were hit. Unfortunately, 11 people have died. My condolences to their families and loved ones. Among the victims was a state emergency service worker. The second strike came while rescuers were already working. 50 people were injured. All have received the necessary assistance. Among the wounded are 7 children, with the youngest being a 10-year-old girl. There were also other attacks today in the Donetsk, Kharkiv, and southern regions. In Kherson, FPV drones once again targeted civilians. Russia continues to prove with its cruelty, day after day, that nothing has changed for them in Moscow. They are not thinking about how to end the war, but how to destroy and capture more while the world allows them to continue. Of course, we are doing everything we can to protect lives. I am grateful to all the leaders, diplomats from partner countries, and civil society figures who support Ukraine, who condemn these Russian strikes, and who call things by their true names. It's important that we continue to coordinate all our efforts with our partners, ensuring effective defense and doing everything possible to bring peace closer, said President Zelensky. We had reported that President Vladimir Putin-led Russia apparently has taken advantage of the lapses coming from the United States, US that has been its secret war rival since 1945, following the actions of President Donald Trump turning US back on Ukraine by thus stopping and blocking military aid and military intelligence to Ukraine, and obviously led Putin to launch massive drone, cruise and ballistic missile attacks on Ukraine, with some U.S. citizens narrowly escaping deaths on Wednesday night when Russia struck a hotel with a ballistic missile that travels 5 times faster than the speed of sound, killing 4 persons and reportedly injured over 30 others at Kryvyi City, with the Ukrainian military saying they were able to repel all other missiles but could not repel the ballistic airstrikes, according to BBC. This Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said that the France F-16 jets and Mirage aircrafts were used to defend the Ukrainian skies, adding that the France Mirage aircraft successfully intercepted Russian cruise missiles. We had reported that the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, in a written and video statement on Monday, has said that what Ukrainians need is a true and honest peace deal and not endless war, just as President Donald Trump of the US and one of the world's richest billionaires, Elon Musk, had continued to use their privileged office and position in the society to launch a terrorist-like media cold war against the person of President Zelensky, apparently to weaken his zeal and cause public disaffection against the Ukrainian president by thus using dangerous negative communication styles of half-truth, manipulated facts, deliberate misrepresentation of facts, misinterpretation of words, spin logic, bullying, game shaming, blaming, belittling, mockery, and trying to hold Ukraine ransom by blocking U.S. military aid to the troubled country for a war. It appears Donald Trump is the first U.S. president that kick-started it by thus. The Trump administration first approved the sale of Javelin anti-tank missiles to Ukraine in December 2017, after civil unrest ensued in Ukraine in 2014 with a protest codenamed Revolution of Dignity, which ousted and forced into exile in Russia the then pro-Russia president Viktor Fedorovich Yanukovych on February 22, 2014. Just a day after, President Vladimir Putin mobilized troops and invaded Ukraine, succeeded in taking over Ukraine's territorial land of Crimea, an action the then US President Barack Obama retaliated by only placing sanctions on Russia assets for violating the constitutional rights of Ukraine. The 2017 action of Donald Trump was a step that former President Barack Obama never took, which Trump allies pointed to be a sign of Trump's toughness on Russia and good for US business, which, given Ukraine lethal weapons, had been a red line for Obama, who feared that it could cause Russia to escalate conflict, which President Vladimir Putin-led Russia actually did. And Ukraine has been fighting Russian soldiers and Russia-backed armed separatists in its eastern provinces since 2014, shortly after Russia illegally occupied and annexed Crimea, in a war that has claimed approximately 13,000 lives and displaced 1.5 million people, according to the Ukrainian government before Volodymyr Zelensky became Ukrainian president in May 20, 2019 on the platform of Servant of the People political party, and before Zelensky became president. Putin violated 3 ceasefire peace deals under Donald Trump in January, February and March 2019, and as at December 2019, Ukrainian military reported a total of more than 70 ceasefire deals violated by Putin-led Russia. And during his inaugural speech on May 20, 2019, when Volodymyr Zelensky took office as president of Ukraine, he said his priority was a ceasefire in the Donbas, and also asserted that Crimea and Donbas are Ukrainian land, and that the people living in those regions are not strangers, they are ours, Ukrainians, truly. On December 9, 2019, the Russian President Vladimir Putin, French President Emmanuel Macron, German Chancellor Angela Merkel, and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky met in person in Paris, France, and agreed on a ceasefire and prisoners exchange. But on same day, 3 Ukrainian soldiers were killed by a landmine by Russian-backed forces who violated the ceasefire 7 more times in December using BMP-1 armored vehicles, grenade launchers, heavy machine guns, and small arms. This Ukrainian military recorded additional 47 ceasefire peace deals violations in 2020, more than 180 ceasefire peace deals violations in 2021 until February 24, 2022. President Vladimir Putin declared full-scale war on Ukraine, describing U.S. government, previous and present he referred to as Washington during his war declaration nationwide address, as an empire of liars. We had reported that President Donald Trump of the United States, U.S. may be trying to cause unnecessary confusion to the traditional way of war settlements which date back to the end of World War I in 1918 and World War II in 1945 when Germany, considered as the aggressor, was meant to pay damages or reparation or the costs incurred by the U.S., Britain, France and the Soviet Union which comprises Russia, Ukraine and 13 other republics when Germany on August 1, 1914 mobilized troops from Berlin to support the defunct Austria-Hungary country which included German-speaking Austrians, Magyars, Slavs, and Italians after the Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia on June 28, 1914 following the bombing and shooting to death the Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir to Austro-Hungarian throne, and his wife, Sophie, the Duchess of Hohenberg, by a suspected group of extremists from Serbia that wanted to increase Serbian power in the Balkans by breaking up the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and the shooting specifically was carried out by a 19-year-old Gavrilo Princip. This, Russia came to the aid of Serbia and with the support of other countries like Britain and France, Austria-Hungary was defeated after so many deaths especially on the side of Serbia's civilian populations, and at the end of the World War I, Germany was made to pay the damages and costs of war as the aggressor, and on September 1, 1939, Adolf Hitler of Germany, who is considered a nationalist extremist, on his apparent quest to expand Iron race in Europe, invaded Poland, a border country whose people were considered inferior and powerless people likely the same way Vladimir Putin of Russia may have seen Ukrainians. The action of Adolf Hitler forced Britain, France, US, and the Soviet Union to declare war on Germany on September 3, 1939 and the defeated Germany at the end of the World War II in 1945 after Adolf Hitler and his top generals refused to surrender and reportedly committed suicides inside their underground bunkers after millions of deaths, especially Jews, and in order to make Germany unable to attack another country again. Britain, France and US occupied West Germany including West Berlin for years with capitalist economy system, and at the same time, the Soviet Union occupied East Germany including East Berlin with communist economy system, and Germany, considered as the aggressor, was again made to pay the damages or the costs of the World War II, which Germany has struggled to pay, up to 2010, and it may be clearer that no victim of World War I, Serbia and World War II, Poland was apparently made to pay debts or sign economic deals for the costs incurred by the countries that came to their aid. This may justify the action of Donald Trump requesting Ukraine to sign rare earth minerals deal with the US as criminally exploitative demand, and Donald Trump pushing the narrative that Europe will get their money back and US will not get its money back is simply and half-truths meant to mislead the public, like President Emmanuel Macron of France recently corrected Donald Trump at the Oval Office that Europe is not getting the money back from Ukraine, that Russia is the one to pay them back the money, most especially from the seized Russia assets in Europe, and the US under the immediate past President Joe Biden seized billions of dollars of Russia assets confiscated to finance US aid to Ukraine. Interestingly, Vladimir Putin of Russia, who is also considered as a nationalist extremist like Adolf Hitler of Germany, on February 24, 2022 in a world news broadcast, made it very clear that he decided to declare special military operations in Ukraine because of US, that for many years, the US tried to expand its powers, stressing he does not have problem with Europe or NATO, saying NATO is the US foreign policy used by the North America to try to conquer Russia by thus enlisting some other countries that made up the defunct Soviet Union into NATO, and he would never allow US to assemble its military infrastructures in Ukraine, its closest neighboring country. Hence he decided to go after the pro-US Ukrainian politicians and government officials by demilitarizing Ukraine and reclaiming it as an independent territory he said was once part of Russia, adding that he mobilized Russian troops to invade and reclaim parts of Ukraine, which included Crimea in 2014, in support of Russia-speaking people in Donbas he said were suffering humiliation and genocide attack by Kyiv government for many years, which President Volodymyr Zelensky in several occasions has accused Putin of always sponsoring and organizing terrorists to kill Ukrainians. We had reported that the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has told United States U.S. President Donald Trump that Ukrainians don't need just a ceasefire from President Vladimir Putin-led Russia, but a complete end to the war, which Ukraine's security will be guaranteed from further or future invasions from the neighboring rival European country, adding that he was in the United States to sign rare earth mineral deals as drafted by both countries' teams, which included Ukraine's security guarantee, making the statement at the Oval Office on Friday afternoon according to American local time, when the meeting went smoothly, friendly and calmly for more than 35 minutes until the U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance interrupted and brought in U.S. internal political matters into the Russia-Ukraine issue by thus condemning the administration of the immediate past President of the U.S., Joe Biden, for always appearing before the press to accuse Putin and Russia of bringing destructions to Ukraine without an act of diplomacy to peace path, which he said the current President Donald Trump is trying to achieve. And the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky quickly responded and asked the U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance what kind of diplomacy is he talking about, reminding the Vice President that Putin has been destroying lives in Ukraine for years during the era of previous presidents before Joe Biden, including 2014 when Russia took over Crimea, to 2022 and 2019 during the first tenure of President Donald Trump, when he signed a ceasefire peace deal with Putin, but the Russian president broke the ceasefire and continued to destroy lives in Ukraine. Obviously and apparently annoyed, Vice President J.D. responded by accusing the visiting Zelensky of coming to the Oval Office to disrespect U.S. sitting president in his office, adding that no president in the world has ever done that before in the Oval Office. The full length of the meeting video footage and the Fox News interview with Zelensky shortly after the Oval Office meeting ended with heated arguments and series of crosstalks are published in full in our audio and video versions of this news reportage. We had reported that, contrary to media speculations, that the embattled Ukraine has reached an agreement with the United States. U.S.-led President Donald Trump on the rare earth minerals deal required as exchange or economic benefits for the U.S. to continue to assist the war-torn Ukraine with military aid against ongoing President Vladimir Putin-led Russia military destructions and bring peace to the country. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, in a video press release on Wednesday night, debunked the speculations, saying, "The U.S. and the Ukrainian teams have been working together in preparation for the negotiations on the terms of the economic deal this coming Friday in the U.S., signaling no agreement has been reached yet." We had reported that the United States President Donald Trump has said that if the war in Ukraine is not stopped now, it could lead or escalate to World War III, with the visiting French President Emmanuel Macron insisting that Russia is the aggressor of the war, hence Russia must pay damages as part of the negotiations for the peace deal. But the US, in another meeting at the United Nations General Assembly on Monday, joined Russia to vote against a resolution condemning Russia over the war in Ukraine. We had reported that, following the public criticism of President Donald Trump of the United States that the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is a man who has lost touch with his people and a dictator who refused to conduct election for new leader to take over the affairs of the country, Zelensky, while asked if he could resign by a journalist at a press conference organized to mark the third-year anniversary of war in Ukraine, says he would do that if it would bring peace to Ukraine, and he's ready to do that as exchange for Ukraine to be enlisted as a member of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO. We had earlier reported that despite the medical condition that he's under, the high flow of oxygen in the hospital over double pneumonia, Pope Francis on Sunday, on the eve of the third-year anniversary of the war in Ukraine launched by President Vladimir Putin-led Russia government, called on everyone in the world to remember victims of the war in Ukraine, describing the war, which started on February 24, 2022, as painful, shameful for all humanity. Previously, we reported that the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has continued his phone conversations with world leaders with a video and written press statement on Saturday saying that the world leaders must ensure that the Russian President Vladimir Putin is not allowed to deceive the world again, insisting that Putin has used Russian army, intelligence services and mercenaries over 30 years to bring death to America, Europe, Africa, Middle East, Syria. This, Zelensky stated after he began special defense campaign with phone conversations with world leaders following strained relationship with one of the countries that has majorly assisted Ukraine in its defense against Russia since 2022 when the war began. United States, U.S. President Donald Trump, who threatened to stop military aid to Ukraine, claiming that Ukraine started the war it knows it cannot win, calling President Volodymyr Zelensky a modestly successful comedian and a dictator that deceived the immediate past U.S. President Joe Biden to commit over $350 billion of U.S.
Bringing you the news in a more digital way.